Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show. News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO with Congressman Jodey Arrington. Congressman, good morning.
Morning, Chad. Good to be with you, buddy.
Glad to have you on the show. A big day today for the House. It looks like you guys will be voting on the Republican tax plan.
That's correct, and I'm excited about it. I think this is, it's an opportunity for the Senate to redeem themselves, but it's for all Americans. It's an opportunity to make our country more competitive. It's an opportunity to give much-needed, much-deserved tax break for hardworking American families. So this is the center pole in the tent for economic growth, and getting out of this 10 years of stagnation and 2% GDP, and we've just gotten way too used to that. We can do better for our people. We can do better by providing better jobs, higher paying jobs, higher household income, just a better quality life.
So who all, under the plan that we have right now, and I know the Senate has a little bit of a different version than what you guys have, but under the House plan, who all would see their taxes go down, and who all would see a tax cut? How many people would end up paying less? Because from what I've read, there's a discrepancy maybe between the two, right?
There is a discrepancy, and I'll explain where the major differences are, at least for me, the ones I'd say I'm most concerned about. I think that they're within the framework, but this is squarely a middle class and working man and woman tax break. The lowest rates or the deepest cuts for individual rates happen at the lower income and middle income folks, individuals and families. We increase the standard deduction. That's the money you pay no taxes on from, for example, if you're a family, a couple, you go from $12,000 to $24,000 as an individual, from $6,000 to $12,000 where it's tax free. So I think that the biggest winners here are going to be the middle and working class people. You've increased the credit for child tax credit. We kept and this is one I signed a letter on, the adoption tax credit, which as a pro-life guy, I think that goes hand in hand. And that's going to be in the Senate bill too. That'll shake out all together in this tax plan. So I think but here's what's lost on, I think, a lot of folks when they hear about the corporate tax or business investment tax breaks. If we can make American businesses competitive and quit putting them in such a hole and such a disadvantage where we're actually sending our jobs and our capital and our companies overseas, these folks these are our job creators. They'll plow that money, that capital, into more productivity, more equipment, better opportunities, higher paying jobs. That's what American families, hardworking middle-class families need. They need not just more of their current paycheck, they need a bigger paycheck, an opportunity for a better job. That's what I'm most excited about. So that's where I think this squarely sits.
Does the House plan get rid of the individual mandate?
It does not, and I supported that. I've co-sponsored an amendment that we tried to get in the Rules Committee. The Senate does. I'm going to be pushing hard for that in conference. I want that freedom restored, and I want people unshackled from this top-down, government-controlled Obamacare just failure. So, yes, that's something I've got my eye on, but it's not in the House bill, but it doesn't mean it won't come out in the final analysis out of conference.
Let's say that when it comes out, the final version comes out, and we can get rid of the individual mandate, which I agree with you would be a huge win for the American people. If we were to get rid of that, does that mean that we can go back in and do even more tax cuts or add back other deductions? How does that work out in your opinion?
With the repeal of Obamacare mandates, we would have to do another reconciliation on some of the regulations and the taxes in that. We could include tax cuts from that Obamacare legislation, the Affordable Care Act. Here's the problem: is that a lot of folks in the Senate, are worried that if we make this too complicated and try to combine health care with sort of this economic growth initiative, that it's going to make it more easy for some senator to say, I don't know, I got a problem with this. Here's what we've got to do. We've got to get this win for the American worker and for the American economy. And we cannot squander this, and we cannot swing and miss, so that we can come in with some momentum to go after welfare reform and health care reform, which, again, the Senate left on its desk. But I think we can come back to it. Let's repeal the mandate. Let's free up the markets. Let's reduce the mandates and regulations, if not altogether eliminate them. But we can do that after we push this tax reform package through. We cannot give the Senate an excuse to say that they just can't find the courage to vote for it and get it to the president.
Congressman, one thing that, I've seen different news stories, where some say, yes, this is a big win for the middle class. Others have said that if you have a family of 4, a family of 5, they will end up paying more at the end of the day, even though they're going to see a tax cut. Have you seen those stories, and how does that work out, or is that even true?
I think that the Democrats are just regurgitating these this sort of tired old, this is a tax cut for the rich, it's not going to really produce results for the American families, the middle class. That's just not true. You can't not benefit when you double the standard deduction and you take the lowest rate of 10% down to 0 and then reduce all the other rates, get rid of the alternative minimum tax. And we haven't even talked about the translation of what businesses will save and what they'll be incentivized to do by investing in their companies and expanding job opportunities. So all these, there's study after study. For example, the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation talks about creating 1 million jobs, and that there will be middle-income households will average $2,500 in after-tax increase or savings of their own money, more in their pocket. It talks about the economy growing 3.5%. So that I could cite Council of Economic Advisor studies, nonprofit, the Joint Tax Committee, on and on and on. There's nobody that can convince me this isn't a tax cut for the middle class and working man and woman in this country.
I've heard you talk about it before, that when you have about, 47% of the country not paying taxes,
yes,
it's not a good thing. Is this going to expand that number of people who aren't paying anything in taxes?
I'm always going to be transparent with you and with my folks back home. I mean, that was where I started in this discussion with my colleagues. I said, guys, everyone ought to pay something. You want to talk about fairness? You want to talk about broadening the base? Even if they pay 2%, everybody ought to participate and own part of the future of this country. And way too many people get something and more than they give to this country, and certainly paying their fair share. So I would say that we don't really fix that, is what I would say. We don't really address that disparity. And I'm not happy about it. I brought it up several times. I think some folks said, look, that's a bridge too far. My take on it, Chad, is, the Democrats are going to say, no matter what, that this is a tax cut for the rich. Listen, our House bill has the same highest tax rate for the highest income staying the same. I don't even like that, because I think all Americans, those who worked hard and were successful and make money, shouldn't be penalized either. But I'm just telling you, it's not perfect, but it does help the middle and working class, and the small business, and it makes us more competitive globally. And those are things that I can rally for and live to fight another day for our conservative cause and for a freer enterprise system, and so on and so forth. But if we don't get this through, party's over, okay? And we won't get an opportunity to advance this conservative agenda because we won't be in the majority.
Visiting with Congressman Jodey Arrington. And before we go to break, one more question on this tax deal, at least for right now, because I know that this is going to change by the time we talk again, I'm sure, with the Senate version. But one thing that I'm seeing in both the Senate version and the House version, yes, there's tax cuts, it's tax reform. We're not really reducing the size of government, though, and we're not really reducing how much money we send to the U.S. government, because every tax cut has to be paid somewhere along the way. It has to balance out. So how do we get to that point? Maybe we're looking long term. How do we get to that point where we can reduce how much money Americans overall are sending to the U.S. government?
So the speaker just appointed me to the debt ceiling and debt reduction task force, and he did that because he knows that is my number one issue. You just hit, and I'm going to agree with you. This doesn't do that, Chad. We've got two things to get out of this $20 trillion debt hole. We've got to grow the economy. 1% GDP growth will increase tax revenue by $3 billion. $3 trillion over 10 years. And we're going to at least do that. So we've got to grow, but the big piece of it is that we've got to cut. We cut $200 billion out of the budget, out of mandatory spending, the biggest cut since in 20 years. But we couldn't get it out of the Senate. So we've got to have the will to start reducing the size of government and start cutting across the board, especially mandatory and entitlement programs. And I'm committed to that, but today is about growing the economy. And we can't give the Senate a reason to make it too complicated or too bold or too comprehensive and give them excuse not to get this to the president's desk.
Congressman, we're going to take a break. If you'll hold with us, we appreciate it. And when we come back, we'll get into some other issues.
Okay.
Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. Congressman Jodey Arrington joining us on the program today. Congressman, let's talk real quick about the National Defense Authorization Act. It passed, which is a good thing.
Yes. So we've got the House and Senate together. This is going to the president, and we're going to make the largest down payment in about a decade in rebuilding our military after it's been, quite frankly, decimated by the Obama administration. $200 billion more than the last authorization and funding from the Obama administration. The threats haven't decreased. They've only increased. And we've got to make sure that our men and women in uniform have the tools necessary to be successful and be safe. That's what this is about.
And what will that mean for folks out of Dyess?
Oh, we got all the funding that we asked for and for Dyess, and the big deal there is getting that next generation bomber, the B-21. And I can tell you, Chad, that I am very confident that we're going to get it. And I've been talking to the top brass at the Air Force, and it's not because of, I'm not going to take credit for it. I would say that the Abilene has won the award for the best community to host a bomber base. So many times they named the trophy the Abilene Trophy. So these guys, I give all the credit to Abilene and their leadership and Dyess. And we had Chairman Thornberry out there for the first time. He came out there at our request, and he was blown away. And I just feel like all that I've heard is it looks good. That will be, for the remainder of the 21st century, Abilene, Texas will have the next bomber. That's 80 years. That's over $1 million a day to their economy. This is a huge win for West Texas. I want to see it on paper, but I can just tell you I'm very confident that's going to happen.
That's huge. It's absolutely huge. Well, and that's some good news. Of course, with the tax plan, that's taking up all of the news right now in the House. What are some other things that y'all are working on, or some other things that will be coming up soon? I know that there aren't a lot of legislative days left in the calendar year, but y'all aren't taking any vacation anytime soon.
Yeah, no, it's this. This will be the big one, we've got to get it done out and to the president's desk by the end of the year. But we've got, our first veterans legislation got off the House floor. This was to help our disabled veteran community. Very proud of that, bipartisan legislation. We've got a major bill in play, and I hope this will be one of the first bills that goes to the president's desk. to help rural hospitals who are being beat down by the regulatory cost of Obamacare, among other things, mainly because they also just don't have a patient base to cover their fixed costs. So and it's a paid for. So just so you know that my legislation there doesn't ask or need another taxpayer dime to help those guys. I think, overall, we've just, the farm bill is really heating up, and we're going to be getting to the brass tacks there in the next, over the next 60 to 90 days. This farm bill will essentially be worked on and all but finalized. So the next big thing outside of the bomber, outside of tax reform, and taking another swing at health care is making sure that cotton's back in the farm bill and we've got a good, sustainable, and responsible safety net for our farmers.
Very good. A lot of folks are talking already about midterm elections and what this will look like, and I know you've been worried about that. You've talked about that in the past about getting things done so that way Republican voters, are fired up and get to the polls. With what we saw in Virginia and other news that has been out, what are your feelings right now about midterm elections and how it's looking for the Republicans?
Well, I think that we get tax reform, and it's going to be a lot of momentum for our guys, and we need that, right? Because we had 8 years of this expansion of government, just to summarize, and we've got to keep the majority, and that's not an easy thing. And I'll talk about that on your show one day. All the things I've learned about the challenges there. With especially purple districts, folks like my colleague John Faso out of New York. They aren't like we are in West Texas. They don't see the world exactly like we do. So we've got tax reform's the big one. If we don't get it, I think we will be just like the historic trend. The party of the president will lose and lose big, and we won't see. We won't have seized the opportunity to get our country back. So, but I don't even like talking like that because I think we're going to win on this, and it's going to go well. And I think the midterms are going to say, look, they're helping our president. President Trump's learning, growing, getting momentum, doing everything he can do.
Congressman, I got to go. Thank you very much.
Buddy. You bet.